algorithm is a process or a set of rules we follow when solving a problem. It isn't always reasonable to illustrate an addition problem out, so instead we can follow the algorithm for adding with negatives. Let's start by adding when our signs match. So if we want to add together a positive plus a positive or a negative plus a negative. To do that, we simply need to add our values together, and then we keep that same sign on our sum. So if we were going to add together positive 59 plus positive 41, I would start by adding 59 plus 41. 59 plus 41 gives me 100. Since both my values are positive, my sum is also going to be positive. So positive 59 plus positive 41 gives me positive 100. I can follow this same process with negatives. Negative 18 plus negative 32. I can start by adding 18 and 32 together to give me 50. Since both my values are negative, my sum is also going to be negative. So negative 18 plus negative 32 gives me negative 50. These same algorithms will work with decimals and fractions. To add positive 1 5/10 to positive 25/100, I would simply add my decimals together. 1 5/10 plus positive 25/100 gives me a total of 1 75/100. Since both values are positive, my sum is also positive. So positive 1 5/10 plus positive 25/100 gives me a sum of positive 1 75/100. When I'm working with fractions, I can follow my rules for both adding with negatives and adding with fractions. On negative 1/8 plus negative 2/8, I can go ahead and add since I already have matching signs. To add with fractions, I need to make sure I have a common denominator, so my denominator is going to be 8, and then I can add my numerators. 1 plus 2 gives me 3. Since both my values are negative, my sum is also going to be negative. So negative 1/8 plus negative 2/8 gives me a sum of negative 3/8. What happens when our signs don't match though? If I want to add a negative to a positive or a positive to a negative? Well, when I start out, I need to ignore my signs. And then I actually find the difference of the two values. Then my sum is going to use the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. Remember, absolute value talks about a number's distance from 0. So if I'm going to add negative 75 plus positive 5, the first thing I need to do is simply find the difference between 75 and 5, which is 70. Absolute value is the distance from 0, and 75 is much farther from 0 than 5 is, so my sum is going to be negative. So negative 75 plus positive 5 gives me a sum of negative 70. Same thing over here. Positive 18 plus negative 23. Again, I'm going to find the difference of these two values. The difference of 18 and 23 is 5. 23 is farther from 0 than 18 is, so it has the greater absolute value. That means my sum is also going to be negative. So positive 18 plus negative 23 gives me a sum of negative 5. Again, we can use the same algorithm when we work with decimals and fractions. Positive 15/100 plus negative 1/100. I would start by finding the difference of 15/100 and 1/100. That gives me a difference of 14/100. Even though these numbers are small, they still have an absolute value. 15/100 is slightly farther from 0 than 1/100 is, so my sum is going to be positive. When I work with fractions, negative 7/9 plus positive 8/9. Again, I want to start by finding the difference. Since their denominators are the same, I know my denominator is going to be 9, so now I can find the difference of 7 and 8. The difference of 7 and 8 is 1. 8/9 has a slightly greater absolute value than 7/9, so we're going to use the sign on positive 8/9 since it has the greater absolute value. So negative 7/9 plus positive 8/9 gives me a sum of 1/9. So if your numbers aren't convenient to illustrate it out, we can come back and use our algorithm to help us solve the problem.